Efficient mentioned here. Oh, there is Rush. Hey mate, sorry I'm late, still have time. Well, actually I don't, unfortunately. In 10 minutes I need to stop my stream. But I would so much love you guiding us, giving pointers and stuff. Perhaps we should just arrange another another day where you can drop by. Rush, we are venturing into PlaneMaker. Just a general kind of summary, and perhaps you can refer to this or further give explanations or pointers in the next stream when you join in on the Discord. Airfoil maker. So we noticed, we already knew from the beginning. I can drop in for a few minutes now if you like before you sign off. Sure, but just for 10 minutes so, and I would still love to have you on another stream, Rush. There are so many questions and it's so interesting. So Discord. Let me stop the music here. You already posted me on Discord. Yeah, so I just call you, start voice call. Let's see what happens. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, I hear for about
Hey, cool, Rush. I don't know if the sound is too loud here, guys, so let me know in chat whether that's the case. Awesome, thank you.
no problem. I'm sorry, man. I overslept. I was like, oh no. So I'm really sorry.
Doesn't matter. I was busy developing, and I saw on Discord that you were idle, and I also thought that you were still asleep. Sweet dreams, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, Rush. I asked you just to just give a general kind of description of how you do your test flights in X-Plane. Perhaps also in parallel with PlaneMaker and with PlaneMaker. I don't quite know the process, so I'm quite curious to see how you go about doing that, because I'm approaching that stage. Still, I guess, just even in preparation for those test flights, we were now working on getting the airfoil right of the Skyhawk, and I'm longing for a lot of data that I cannot find in, at least through Google search. So that's an entirely different topic, but that's one that I'm focused on right now. So those are the two kind of subjects so far that I would really appreciate your guidance, or some pointers at least, in these remaining minutes that can get me going a bit into the right direction at least.
Yeah, so what's really hard there is seeing how you're talking there is just looking at the airfoil generator and the data there and saying, oh, okay, well, the airfoil generator there says that the aircraft's going to stall once it goes past 16 degrees of alpha. What's hard with this is, say, the 172 is the data on the 172 is not really complete, even though it's a very well-known aircraft, is that you know that there's a different airfoil at the root of the wing to the tip of the wing, Yeah, so the tip of the wing has almost a symmetrical airfoil, and at the root has the 2412, just the standard cookie cutter airfoil.
Right.
So when you just look at this airfoil that you had there, which was at the root, well, the way X-Plane interpolates between those two. Those wing stations is it's not going to stall at 16 alpha. There's that 2.5. I think it's 2.5 degree of wing twist. There's some wing twist there.
Yeah, three degrees in total. Yeah.
3 degrees total. Yeah, it's like -0.5 at the tip and +2.5, if I remember right.
Something like that.
Yeah. So you really are onto the test flight thing, because I think you can get bogged down by that data. You've just got to jump in the aeroplane and test it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
The way that I test it is I kind of split into two things. There's subjective data that I can use, and then there's objective data. And the objective data is things like stall speed and all of these other things. Yeah. So my first test flight that I always do is a stall speed test. So get the thing off the ground. I start up somewhere that's at sea level. I just fly around for 5 minutes, stalling, basically. That's all they do.
But Rush, I guess you also run some data refs or some windows, I think, through Explain where you can see what the current angle of attack is, or other stuff that you need some additional numbers rather than just your airspeed indicator and your attitude indicator. Yeah.
Yes, correct. That's a really good actual gotcha. There is that all of the data that we know of as pilots is airspeed, right? The IAS. Well, in this case, that's not the real number. What we really need is the calibrated airspeed. If you use the IAS, it's not the actual speed that you're flying at due to pitot error, blah 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 blah. So those data refs, they pop up. There's a little section when we come back next time you stream. We'll go through them all. But I get the data ref numbers up. I get the calibrated airspeed numbers up, and there's a few other things that I get.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well in your streams. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're important to have, but the first thing when you start test flying, in my opinion, is get the stall speeds right. Just fly around, get the stall speeds right, because it's going to set everything else from that. VNE is not really an issue for us, but stall speeds are. Because it's going to set your drag profile. It's going to set a lot of things, and then you move up from there, even post-stall. But anyway, yeah.
And in Rush, I mean, also in PlaneMaker, there is stuff that we need to put in, drag coefficients and stuff of the fuselage and whatever. I guess that needs to be set first before we do those test flights and then mess around in AeroSimGaming. Am I right, or?
Yes and no. I wouldn't say you'd need to worry too much about drag right away. The reason being is that, drag doesn't really affect your stall speed. It will affect the way that you approach the stall. So you need to think...
Yeah.
So at this point, you need to think like a real test pilot. And I've got some data here. I'll send you some links later. Is that a real test pilot, when they're testing a stall, is that they approach a stall in different ways. You know, us as sim pilots, we might fly along and just yank the stick back and go, oh, is the aircraft stalled? Yeah, sure. Well, a real pilot will do stall tests, approaching a stall at about a 1 knot per second deceleration rate.
Right,
so,
okay.
So you'll start off at 60 knots, for example. You'll get the aircraft in trim at 60 knots, so you can fly hands off.
Yeah.
This is real test pilot-y stuff. And then what you'll do is
this is so cool.
And you'll start decelerating at 1 knot per second. So you don't have to have a stopwatch out or anything, but you just want to see, okay, 59,
gotcha.
58. And so how you approach the stall does actually dictate how the stall happens. So we go 1 knot a second, we keep pulling, and then we note when we get buffet, wing drop, or anything like that. We can write it down on a little piece of paper ahead of us. And do that maybe twice, because the first few times you're never going to get the decel rate properly. You're going to go too fast. And then just for funsies, try it a little bit faster. Try it at like 5 knots. You'll see what I mean. You'll pull the stick back, and all of a sudden you'll stall probably 2 to 3 to sometimes maybe even 10 knots faster than what you would when you approach the stall slowly, when you approach it properly. Mm-hmm. So that's probably that's just the
first step. You mean just the first primary? All right, and this is with flaps up, I guess, right? This is just the basic airfoil, how it behaves, just with yeah.
Because what you're not just testing the stall speed here. What you're testing is that you have the correct wing surface area. So the wing surface area is going to dictate your stall speed. In this case, the airfoil you've got there will dictate the angle of attack that Explain thinks you're going to stall at. So if you find that you're stalling too short, like too low an airspeed, well, you have too much surface area of the wing. So there's, the way that lift works, right? Like the whole force gets generated out across the surface area of the wing. Mm-hmm. So if you reduce or add surface area, that will change your stall speed.
Obviously, yeah.
But your stalling alpha is done here in Airfoil Maker.
Right. Yeah. Interesting stuff, man. And I guess it's already at the front door of complexity. I mean, this is just the first. This is kind of like calibrating general lift coefficient curve almost, just getting that
Yeah.
stall behavior. And what
Yep.
about the negative angle of attack? Because I just learned today that you obviously can also stall the wing in a negative angle of attack, right? That's the bottom part of the. I guess we're not going to do that in X-Plane.
No. So any of that, pretty much any data, because, okay, so this is why I don't care about any of that. Yeah, X-Plane needs it because aircraft can fly upside down and backwards. So X-Plane needs the data there. But to get to a negative, to get to a minus, what is that, like a minus 15 angle of attack, you'd need to be pulling like negative 8G. And
we were thinking about that as well. Yeah, so and it's also in the airplane airfoil maker manual. Laminar is also saying, well, this is quite unrealistic for normal general aviation flight, but still, yeah. So we are only concerned with the realistic stall there in the pluses. Yeah.
Yeah, but you still want the graph to be okay on the negative side for maybe the first 5 degrees, because especially post-stall, when you post-stall, there will be slight changes in the alpha.
Yeah.
But the extremes, who cares? You're just going to waste your time on it. So, and if someone writes you an email complaining that the aircraft doesn't work properly at minus 8G, well, you know.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So I still need to do some work in PlaneMaker just to get it, even be able to get into the air with the thing. But once I get into the air, that will be the first thing. So to get those stalls.
Yeah,
following the performance tables, and then that's interesting. So then, if I'm off, and that the chances would be that I'm off with my stall speeds or with my angle of attacks, then I need to know. I mean, that's also the general kind of fuzziness around airfoil maker, at least in my mind. Currently, there are so many variables. So I was also curious to know when you're flying with your drawings and your sketches and your stuff, if you find something that is off, how do you go back to airfoil maker or PlaneMaker and know, I just need to increase the surface area of the wing, or I just need to, because it could be anything, right?
It could, yeah. So you're right. There is a myriad, and good news, bad news scenario is it's experience. So you'll end up just going, the plane just doesn't feel right this way, and already looking at your curve there, the drag curve doesn't look right. So it's little things like that. I'll probably talk to you offline about this, because Airfoil Maker is not the best tool to make airfoils. There's another tool that I use that is super duper secret, but
I love secret.
I'll show you. So I'll show you how to use that offline.
Interesting, but it can still be. I guess that's also how you made the Super Cup, or is it also
correct.
made?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Alrighty. This is interesting, Rush. I so much appreciate you being here, man. I feel like I need to buy myself an AeroSimGaming sweater as well, just to get into the same spirit. Oh man, this is so cool. But again, and just out of curiosity, we're just starting with this, or I'm just starting with this. How much maths and physics and other really complex? What's in your mind? What's the most complex, most challenging stage of this whole aircraft development part, at least for the what is concerned with the flight model and stuff, so PlaneMaker and PlaneMaker? What's the chunk where you think, well, that's when shit's going to hit the fan?
I think you're already over that. I think you're already over that threshold. It's usually data collection, honestly, because there's a lot of stuff that we now know about aerodynamics in the modern day world, right? We can go and do all sorts of computational fluid dynamics, and there's online resources for those if you really want to use them. But I kind of approach this as if I was in the 1940s, 1938, start of World War II, I've read a lot of the manuals that they would use for test flying, because, these were dudes walking around with slide rules and abacus, basically, and they were trying to figure out, why they didn't even know why aircraft were flying back then. They were just like, look, we don't sure. There's like some Bernoulli's theorem stuff happening. So I would approach looking at aircraft and trying to quantify. That's really what we're trying to do, is quantify and then code an aircraft here. A lot by feel. I put myself in the seat with my joystick and I pretend I'm a test pilot and I operate the thing like they would. And sure, it's a lot shorter. What they would do over a period is that's one of the advantages we have, right? Is in a
Yeah,
real
sure.
aeroplane, there's fuel, there's weight.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
In the flight sim, well, I can change the weight of the aircraft mid-flight. I don't need to land and put fuel in or add shots of lead and stuff like. I just fly along. And go, oh, I want the plane to be a little bit heavier. Great, let's see what happens. So that's I honestly think the biggest thing is data collection, and then there is just a grind of test flying, because you're going to test fly and you're going to be like, this isn't right.
Yeah.
I can't tell what's not right, and you're not going to know, just like you said, you're not going to know where to turn. You'd be like, oh, look, the decel rate's a little bit fast, or it just won't stall, or
Yeah. But how much time does it take on average for you if you to optimize that flight model to make it approximately a good flight model? How much time would it take you to do those test flights? How many test flights? Just an average, so I have a general sense of how much time it would take. Not that I really care, but I'm just curious.
easily a week, easily a week.
Right, right,
Sometimes
right.
longer. Like the aircraft that I know, it's a shorter time period. Aircraft that I
Yeah,
don't know,
yeah,
because you've got to test it at every altitude range, weight combinations. You're
oh
doing all
yeah,
this in
that's
zero
true.
wind, ISA
Yeah,
conditions. But yeah, there's quite a lot, because you can skip, like you can just, um, you know, take the aircraft to 8,000 feet instantly or drop it to 5. But there's also times where you want to check climb rates, decel rates. So then
yeah,
you
yeah,
start
yeah,
building
yeah, yeah,
a.
yeah.
You'll see when I do a quick test flight of aircraft, is my first thing I do is I'll take off, I'll do some stalls, and I try and do everything in one little flight. So I take off, I'll do some stalls. After I've done some stalls, I'll go, great. I'll level off at 1,000 feet, let the aircraft get stable at about 60 knots at a low speed, and then I'll go ahead and go to a climb rate. So I'll go to whatever the book says as its max performance climb, which will usually be an airspeed and a power setting. So I'll go airspeed, power setting, and I'll start the climb, and I'll sit there and see how it goes to 10,000 feet or a reasonable altitude, all the while taking note of how long it will take me to get to that
Oh man, it
altitude.
sounds
Once I'm
so cool. Yeah, 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 yeah. I totally
Yeah,
get what you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And that's the kind of scheme. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so the stall would be the first thing, and I can then gradually build up my feel for the aircraft in reference to the performance tables and the stuff that I would like to see the aircraft show in the sim.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Say again.
Well, that I'm trying to follow your general approach there on how to do that test flight.
Yeah.
So I would start with
Yeah.
doing those stalls first, and then from
Yeah.
that moment on, gradually do other flight maneuvers or stuff in reference to the performance tables to see if I'm approaching those numbers as best as
Yeah.
I can. And you also say, well, it's partly experience. I mean, is there any good resource on how to do those test flights? Is there anything that you're using that you say, well, you should really study that stuff because that provides a structured or more systematic way of doing this? Or is there any rush resource here?
No, so it's a good thing. I probably should write something like that, because I read through. There's a test pilot school down in the States, whoever they are. So I've got their resource. There's an experimental aircraft test pilot. Um, I've used those and then grafted into my own, because again, real world versus flight sim, we don't have the same issues.
Yeah,
When they do CG testing, well, we can do that in one flight.
yeah, obviously.
So
Yeah,
there's nothing directly like that. I think the biggest thing is to separate subjective and objective, because you're going to jump in the plane, you're going to go, wow, it feels like an extra 300. It wants to barrel roll and do all these weird things. Well, yeah, you want to ignore those as much as you can. If the plane doesn't feel right, ignore it until the very end, because you'll start going after feel, and those feel
yeah,
things
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah,
sometimes
yeah, yeah,
change
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
objective numbers.
Good one, good one.
Um, yeah, so save those for later. Start with the numbers that you can quantify, things that you can
Roger.
quantify,
Yeah.
which stall speed, angle of attack, time to climb, cruise speeds, all of those things. So my first step would be, like we said, stalling, and then after that would actually be top speed. And here's another tip for when you're testing the top speed. So again, test pilot school is that a top speed run is defined as an aircraft flying at a set altitude with a set power, and then you start a timer for 2 minutes. And after 2 minutes, that's when you take the top speed. So, and the other way that you get there is the proper way of getting to a top speed is you'll actually say you're going to do a top speed run at 2,000 feet.
Yeah.
What you should do is climb up to 2,200 feet and then descend down at about 100 to 150 foot a minute, back down to 2,000 feet, level off there, then start your timer. So there's a weird bit of math in there where it's easier. An aircraft will find its steady state if you come from above rather than below because of the drag profile, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Whether X-Plane does that, I've no idea, but it's fun to do. So, like, just yeah. So
well, I'm following your book there. Interesting stuff. Okay. I'm already feeling like a test pilot or a wannabe test pilot. My gosh, it's going to take a lot more time than I initially thought, actually. And I also appreciate that pointer, like saying first the numbers, then the subjective feel for how it flies, because it can lead you, away from those golden numbers. Yeah.
I think it does take time, and I think the biggest time for yourself is probably going to be that learning curve, and that learning. Or where do I need to look? Is it surface area? Is it the of the wing? But half of that is a learning experience where you go, oh, okay, yeah, well, I think it's going to be the chord of the wing because.
So this is more like a trial and error kind of scheme, then, at least from my perspective right now here. So I just figure that I'm just going to do that, for example, with that stall, and I'm discovering that it's not right, and I'm going to change something, and I will just on the go discover that it had to do with whatever, rather than just going through it in a more structured manner. I guess it's just like following your gut feeling or something like that, and then through that learning, developing some kind of conceptual understanding of what's going on. Or is there some kind of guide that I can follow in that sense? So when I'm off with my stall, then I can say, I go through a 5-step of how to find the right variable in PlaneMaker.
There's no direct guide. It's just an understanding of aerodynamics. What does the aspect ratio of a wing? How does that have any? How does that affect the stall speed?
Yeah. So it becomes also quite an intuitive understanding of what aerodynamics actually are, rather than just plain numbers. Obviously.
So you can go, okay, well, if I have a higher aspect ratio wing, because here's the thing, X-Plane is perfect. So you're trying to fit perfect real-world data into a non-perfect, imperfect, whatever the fancy word is. So you're trying to fit perfect data into something that's not perfect. And you can sit there and just keep ramming that data into the simulator, and it's never going to work. So at some point, you have to go, okay, I've got it as close as I can with the data. Now I just need a tune for X-Plane. So you then need to tune for X-Plane, and that's the hardest part, is because you'll be bashing your head. You're like, I've put the right number in, I've got the data.
That's a good one. Yeah. I can imagine that will be the main issue there. Yeah, or the challenge, I should say.
Yeah.
Rush, this is so cool. Okay, so your general advice would be just, I guess just first make in order all of the PlaneMaker stuff so the thing can fly, then fly and do a basic first short flight, and just start with the stalls, perhaps some climbs and descents, so just to get a general idea of what the airplane is doing or not doing, and from that just be a kind of an aerodynamic genius and just tinker with some numbers and try to optimize the model. And while you go, just develop a better understanding of what you're actually doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just write down some notes. Don't go write down some notes from the flight and then look at those notes and then go, oh, okay. Have some time to think about what your notes could mean. Is
Yeah.
there too
Yeah.
much surface area? Maybe I don't have the right airfoils in. Maybe, but I can tell you right now, the biggest thing is once you've got the airfoils correct, your job is going to be so much easier. But I'll talk to you about that offline. But
For
once you've got the
sure.
airfoils correct, uh, like X-plane is actually really accurate.
All right. So, but that would suggest then that I mean, I've read some stuff about obviously airfoil maker versus PlaneMaker, and many say, well, it's actually the airfoil maker or the airfoil rather than the application, but the airfoil that really makes the most significant difference in how the aircraft flies, rather than what you put into PlaneMaker. Is that correct in your view?
Uh, no, like you can't have one without the other.
Okay.
But it helps. So you can make a crappy airfoil in Airfoil Maker fly close to the real plane. You can make it fly close to the real plane by putting the data into PlaneMaker. But if you have the correct data, if you have really good airfoils in Airfoil Maker or generated through this other software, you will get a better aircraft, but it's no guarantee. Like there's people that
Right.
use external software and their planes are still poo. There's people that just use stock X-Plane 11 airfoils and they still fly okay. So yeah.
Alrighty, alrighty. So I'm really curious to see what application you are using actually to do those airfoils. At the same time, though, I think I'm also going to lose some transparency to the viewers because partly this series is also about inspiring other sim pilots as well, just to tinker with PlaneMaker or even make their own aircraft. So I guess I cannot stream that stuff. I guess.
Well, I mean, if you want to, if what you're trying to achieve is showing how someone at home can do this, then sure, do it. Because the other software, like you almost need a degree to run. It's really difficult.
Oh my gosh.
You need to understand. Yeah, you need to understand a lot, like
Right.
Reynolds numbers and blah 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 blah. It's very difficult. So if you want to stick with what you've got here, then you still can get accurate airfoils here. You still can. So if that's what you want to stick with, being able to show everything, then just do it here in Airfoil Maker.
Yeah, but
It's simple as that.
it wouldn't be Super Cup style then in the end. You cannot be that precise or sophisticated with the airfoil.
No, you can't. No, you can get fairly because there's gaps in the data, right? You've probably found that when you've looked for a 2412. Well, what happens at high speed? Like, what does a 2412 look like at high speed? There's no data for that anywhere. You have to
Right.
make the
Right.
data yourself. Yeah, so it's
Right. Well, I'm curious to see the app anyway, just to see what
yeah.
kind of environment you're working in when you're doing your stuff. But
Mhm.
perhaps I'm going to stick with one. Because one thing that triggered me also with Airflow Maker is I obviously already found in the manuals that the Sky 172 was based off the NACA 2412. But then when I was looking at I loaded up the default 172 also with the airfoil labs just to see what those guys were doing with their wings and their airfoils. I saw that they had a slightly different airfoil loaded up for the root part of the wing and the tip cord of the wing, rather than just using that default 2412. And we compared some numbers, and you can actually see that they changed quite a lot of numbers there, variables, things that you can, well, at least manipulate here in Airfoil Maker. And so I was wondering, where do they get the data from? Is there some kind of a table somewhere in some kind of other fancy manual of the 172 that we can refer to? But gradually, while we were searching, I couldn't find anything. So that already dawned at me that it perhaps was just about doing test flights and just putting in those numbers based off what I see in X-Plane when I fly my Skyhawk. And if I understand you correctly, that's indeed how they came to those numbers. Is just flying the damn thing and just manipulating those numbers there, or is there some kind of a booklet or manual somewhere that does describe the exact numbers here, all of these coefficients for the different stations of the wing of the Skyhawk?
Yeah, there's two resources here. One, I just put a link in chat. It's called the Incomplete Guide to Airfoils, and literally has a link of every airfoil ever made.
Oh yeah,
Well, you can
familiar.
see
Looks
the.
familiar.
You familiar? Yeah, and then the other one's airfoil tools. Have you seen that?
Yeah, too, but those were just basic. That's just showing characteristics of that basic generic airfoil. And what I'm noticing with the default 172 is that they've taken that 2412 airfoil, but then changed it up so it more closely fits with the Skyhawk. At least that's how I interpreted it. I don't know if that's true, but so I can find a lot of data on the 2412, but apparently for the Skyhawk, it seems more aircraft specific, or they changed or modified some characteristics of the airfoil to make it more fitting for the Sky 172. And that's what when I thought, well, is there some table that says, well, we've used 2412, but we modify these and these and these numbers. And so I can just copy paste those into PlaneMaker and I'm happy. But apparently that's not that easy.
No, I don't think so. I don't know how they've done it. Airfoil Labs is super duper fancy. They make commercial level products in under another business name, and they might use MATLAB or they might use a whole bunch of other things to get those numbers a little bit better.
All right.
But I still think they're going to come back to putting the plane in into X-Plane, flying it and making it fly properly. Because again, X-Plane is
Roger.
not perfect.
Yeah. That's an important one. That's an important one. Yeah. So even though you have a table from some manual, authorized, blah, 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 even if you put those numbers in, then it could still be that X-Plane doesn't show the same kind of flight behavior that you would like it to show because you're just a student pilot and like to. Yeah, that's an important one. Yeah, so that's still it's leading. Yeah, ultimately it is just about how does the thing fly in X-Plane, and you can use some objectivity first to get the main numbers right, and then there's some subjectivity where you can tweak things and make it, well, optimize it, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, that's a great starting point. Okay, this is going to be interesting, Rush. Cool. So if that's okay, I would just follow up on your advice here. Still need some stuff to do before we can even go airborne. And I would really love to invite you another time on the stream to ask you some more advanced or follow-up questions on this stuff. Perhaps you can even review our test flights to see, hey, I'm going to make some notes based off of what you're suggesting while I'm doing my stalls and stuff. And that might, well, suggest to me that there's something wrong with the wings or whatever. But I'm also curious to see how you would interpret that data or those results and say, well, I think it's about this, that, and this, to more, to increase my learning curve there. Perhaps that's a nice addition, perhaps later on. I know that you're tight on time, but I just love to pick your brain here. It's such a niche almost. It's interesting. Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining in on the Discord, Rush. Much appreciated. Hope you're doing well with your real world aircraft, man. You're the proper engineer in the sim community. How is it going?
Just pretend. It's going okay.
No, you're not pretending.
The vertical stab is all finished now. So the horizontal, vertical stab is done. The rudder's the next thing to get started. So.
Awesome. So for anyone who who is unaware of AeroSimGaming, you'll be living in some kind of cave if you haven't heard of him. Go to AeroSimGaming and have a look at what the guy is doing. Obviously, he's also been doing test flights with aircrafts in X-Plane. That's why I also invite him in here on the stream to learn from. But he's also actually making a real world aircraft on its own, in its own hangar. Man, if somewhere I would have some kind of, I'm working as a researcher at the university, and sometimes conferences are in the US or in Canada or somewhere. I'm going to pick a conference near where your hangar is, so I can just make a short trip just to visit. That would be really, really awesome. Man, really awesome job you're doing. Keep up the good work, Rush. It's really inspirational.
Thanks, man.
So once more, thank you, and we'll just do some closing off here on the stream, and then we'll say goodbyes and stream some other time, and get starting with a test pilot kind of thing of optimizing my Skyhawk. Man, it sounds challenging and fun at the same time. Steep learning curve, Rush. Interesting.
Oh yeah.
Well, thanks again, and talk to you later.
No problem. Catch ya. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Alrighty, so that was our dear Rush. Awesome, guys. Isn't that cool? That's the flight sim community. Not that Rush and me represent the entire flight sim community, but this is what I love about, also Mrs. Uncertified loves about the community, is just help and support and encouragement. It's really, really cool. So again, to wrap things up, there probably is no table with specific information about the airfoil for the Skyhawk 172, Laminar, or Airfoil Labs. Apparently Airfoil Labs is quite sophisticated in its wing airfoil kind of calculations. If I loaded up Airfoil Labs' Cessna 172 and PlaneMaker, it actually looks quite off of the sketches that we have. So I'm actually a bit surprised, let alone that the Airfoil Labs use slats at the leading edge of the wings and huge wing flap chord sizes. But perhaps they're doing that because that's an important point what we're just saying. Even though you got the objective numbers of how the Skyhawk should behave, or what the wingspan or the wing twist or whatever it may be, what is actually like in the real world, the ultimate goal is obviously to make it fly in X-plane like it's realistic and as it would be in the real world. So, and that could be that we should perhaps tweak some things in PlaneMaker or in Airfoil Maker that makes the airfoil or the particular flight model looking different from what it actually is, but doing so in order to make it fly more realistic in X-plane. That's an important thing. So that at least in my mind, I should not fixate so much on finding the right numbers. I should still use those obviously as a baseline, but then the subjectivity comes in. That's a really good, great pointer that I'm going to follow up. Still though, if I look at the PlaneMaker, for those who haven't seen it yet, I'm so proud of this thing. It's looking great. Some silly things that we added on, for example, the pitot tube, which has negligible effect on how the airplane flies. Perhaps we should even remove it because it just draws on FPS, or I don't know. I just love to model it anyways. This thing is not able to fly yet, even though I like to do test flights. So also we need to give the proper particular airfoil. We just also need to put in all kinds of other numbers in to just make the engine work, and all kinds of other stuff. So that's up first. And then once we have something that seems to approach a good kind of Skyhawk that is flyable in X-plane, then we're going to load it up, and then we're going to follow that scheme to getting those numbers right. Oh man, I'm really excited. I hope you are as well, guys. Okay, so greatly past my time here. I think I will be late on my next meeting, most likely. But I don't care. I could have chatted with Rush all day, I think. So let's close it off. Let me see. I will put this away. This is saved. Yeah, so I will stop my search for those tables. That's good to know. Otherwise, we would have been searching for many streams, which is a waste of time. Airfoil Maker, main wings, and Rush. Well, Rush indeed. What did I plan for my next episodes? Yeah, so that was all the airfoil stuff, vertical stabilizer, airfoil, blah, 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 blah. I think we should actually postpone that then. And for the next episode, work on making the thing flyable. So that means the engine, all of that stuff, the nose wheel needs to be able to steer, and yeah, so I need to further outline all of these subtasks here, but make the plane flyable so we can do our test flights, and then the airfoil thingy comes into play. I'm also quite curious to learn about that application that Rush is using, but I think for the sake of transparency, I'm going to stick to Airfoil Maker. Or I need to reconsider there, because I still love to make a Skyhawk that is realistic ultimately, but it's realistic not in the sense of the exact same airfoil, but it needs to fly in X-plane like it is a Cessna 172. So I need to think think a little bit more of that, because I think it's really nice about this video series is also show you how to do this. And when there's some blank in between where I do something in another application, but also as Rush already explained, that thing is quite sophisticated. So I guess even though I wanted to, I think I'm going to gaze at that application and think, yeah, that's interesting, but this is too much. It's interesting though, but too much for me to also include in my curve here. It's already quite steep. And we might do that perhaps in some later episodes when I like to improve on that airfoil. But it's great to know what tools the guys are using for making their awesome airplanes. I was also referring to the Super Cup, for those who don't know. That's a product that Rush offers, also in collaboration with SimCoders. Super Cup, a really great looking airplane. I have it too. Really great flight performance and stuff. It's also looks really pretty. So any guide or any pointers I could get from that team, from Rush and his friends, is helpful. And I know that stuff leads to quality aircraft. So yeah. Anyways, Jim, stay for another hour. You know you want to. Yeah, well, at least even a couple of more hours. But no, I have to call my friend soon to say that I'm a bit later. But I enjoyed myself, guys. My gosh, this is so exciting. Having said that, let's close it off then, because I really need to get going. Click. No, that's not a good click. That click. Yeah. So that completes this current episode. Did a lot of searching and stuff. Introduced ourselves. Familiarized with PlaneMaker. That's great. And we know that we should actually skip PlaneMaker for now and first work on making our Skyhawk flyable. Cannot wait to fly it. That would also take several episodes, I guess. And then we're going to do some test flights and go back to PlaneMaker to perhaps do some modifications, optimizations, and that might be the way to go about it. So I really appreciate that help. Again, Rush, thank you for dropping by. Really appreciate that support. I know that he doesn't have that much time, so I'm very grateful that he offers his help. Guys, thank you so much for dropping by. Rush, again, thanks. See ya. Microsoft, well, there are many of you. SN, MiniWebs, obviously. Taui, thank you also. Good to see you for such a... It's been a while, so good to see you again here on the stream. And hoping to see you very, very soon. Tomorrow's going to be a family day. I'm away. So I think I'm going to stream Monday or Tuesday. Now, guys, as always, happy flights.